Yo, what is up guys, Grim here, and in today's video we're going to be talking about a bow which has got some people very excited. The Widowhail bow here, which is a pretty cool bow, and I kind of was really interested in seeing how powerful this bow could be and whether or not it could fix some of the issues that bows have. Now, in order to make this video a little bit more interesting, we're also going to be talking about the Vaal bow gems, because people kind of complained that I didn't talk about them last time. So we're going to be talking about those. We're also going to be talking about mana forged arrows. In addition to that, we'll also be picking up on a few things that people mentioned from my last video, like a large thread of hope, as well as a few other things. It's going to be pretty cool. So without further ado, let's get into it. So in order to kind of check this bow out, I wanted to give it the absolute best case scenario for a build. Now, in order to do this, I decided I would grab my league starter here, which you guys are going to be able to have access to soon enough. I'm just still doing a little bit of tweaking here and there. And I figured that we'd kind of compare it with what I know and what I've experienced in terms of gear, and then kind of compare it to a Widowhail bow kind of build here, and really see, you know, okay, what is the kind of comparison? Could this be better on a medium investment bow build than what is already out there? That would be the question. So that is really going to be what we have to answer here. So to give you guys a bit of context, so I kind of wanted to give you guys a bit of an introduction to the build that we'll be putting this bow on. This is my artillery ballista league starter that I played in the Sanctum League, and I'm happy to announce that it's actually been pretty much buffed overall from the changes. I've done all of the PvPing, I've checked it all out, and it is overall quite a substantial buff. Hurrah! That is a really big deal. Now, what's also pretty cool is that I played this last league, and all of the gear in this POB is actually the exact same as the gear I have in my day 3 POB. If you're curious, I'm going to leave a link down below, but this is me from day 3 here. And this is pretty much exactly what I have in the POB. I have an extra inspired learning here on day 3 in Sanctum, but that's kind of what you can expect. And we actually ended up farming 2 Mage Bloods with this build. I was playing with someone else, and that was pretty fun. We overall farmed up so much currency, and the build was fully able to do like delirium, 80% delirium, all sorts of legions, all sorts of stuff like that with the gear you're seeing here. So if we could take the Widowhail bow and improve the build even more, oh my gosh, that would be incredible. And that overall is going to be the aim of this video. How much would it take to improve the build? Now, the fatal flaw of bow builds, despite being incredibly powerful and being buffed, is actually a bit of a tough one. It's actually the bow. That is the fatal flaw of bow builds. And you're seeing the bow I have here. This is a fractured double elemental spine bow multi-modded. This is quite acquirable. You could see that I had it on day 3 there. It's not too hard to get, but this is the item you need for bow builds to actually start to feel good. And it is not that easy to get early, because you need a very specific fractured bow base. And I imagine combining that with the new Crucible stuff, it's only going to be even harder to get in the Crucible League, and there's quite a lot of interest in bows, so that is definitely going to be a problem, and that is where this new unique bow could really save the day. So that is going to be the question. Can you replace this spine bow here with the new unique bow? Because before you get the spine bow, the build, okay, it can do the first 2 void stones, no problem, but it's really struggling a little bit, to clear legions, to clear deliriums, to clear harvest and all stuff like that. But it's like not the best. So if we could kind of get over that hump, we've got insane early game, we've got insane mid game, then we'd have an insane end game transition as well. So we're going to take a look at this bow, and I've decided to give it a little bit of extra juice. So the bow, which has been shown to have 225% increased bonuses from your equipped quiver. So if you guys are not familiar with this bow, it's essentially what I would assume is going to be a pretty common bow, and it basically just triples, or in some cases doubles, or maybe like quadruples depending on how you look at it, your quiver's stats. So it's really going to be dependent on how good your quiver is. So the best quiver which you can get your hands on normally in a league start scenario and all the way into the end game until you get like some pretty crazy gear is actually the Poised Prism. It's got a ton of resist, and it's got a ton of flat damage, which you really do want and you really do need. It's also got some pretty good elemental damage there from the implicit, and you pretty much use this all the way until you get some absolutely crazy +1 critical strike multiplier quiver. And the first question is, okay, well, if you're using the Poised Prism, does this thing actually make it so that the Poised Prism is just better with that unique bow? Let's take a look. We're assuming that we can get a 300% Widowhail here. Let's take a quick look. Okay, well, we just lost 2/3 of our damage here. That is not ideal. So obviously it's not going to be very good with your generic Poised Prism quiver. That is just not going to work. So the next step would be to understand, okay, well, what if you gave this Widowhail literally the best case scenario? If it could possibly be good with literally like insane quiver, like what is the best quiver you could make? That would be the question. So right now we're doing 6.8 million damage with our day 3 gear here. Well, what would happen if we used the new bow with a mirror tier quiver? Okay, let's take a quick look and compare what we're looking at here. So Widowhail, and then we're going to use this triple T1 attack speed, T1 crit, T1 multi quiver here with an implicit. And what is that damage? Okay, it goes up to 8 million. So it's going to be 2 million higher than the pretty budget setup here with a mirror tier quiver and a maxed out roll, which might not even be possible with Widowhail. So is that good? Well, not really. Now you could actually add on an additional arrow here. You could go for stuff like synthesized implicits, but at that point, you're pretty much looking at, just having an insane build already. We're already getting into some pretty ridiculous territory here. There may be some unique quivers that I've overlooked, which you could use this with. There may also be like some accessible implicits like corruptions and stuff like that you could look into. But based on stuff which is easily accessible in the early game of a league, it doesn't look like Widowhail is going to be a very competitive option here, because even with the pretty much best outside of synth implicits, it's only like a little bit better than what we already had, and we lost all that resistance, man, and we actually kind of needed that, bro. So that's definitely not ideal. And if you actually want to see something hilarious, if we just put our normal bow back on, we actually get more damage than using the unique bow with this quiver. So I really don't think that the bow is gonna really be a very good T15, 16 kind of mapping bow. There is some things that you can do with it. The thing which really undoes this bow is it doesn't have any base multipliers. So you can see there the critical strike chance incredibly low, the attacks per second incredibly low, and that's what everything is based on. Without being able to multiply those, it's kind of a bit tough. So if you got stuff like base crit on the weapon, on your gloves, everywhere, then you could start to see things be a little bit better. You can see our crit chance right now is 40%. That is really bad. If you could get that up higher, we could be in business. If you get that attacks per second up higher, we could be in business. If you enchant it with a harvest modifier, that would definitely help as well. But now the bow doesn't have an enchantment either. And you can maybe potentially use a Crucible Forge to make this bow a little bit better as well. But we're really splitting hairs here. I really don't think the bow is going to be very good in T14 to 16 maps based on what I have currently seen and tried to make with it. Even with the best case scenario, it's kind of still a little bit, underwhelming, I think. It's possible it could go up to 400% or even 500%, but I think we're kind of getting into the fantasy land now. All right, so I've kind of talked about that. Is there any other use cases for this bow? Well, if it's incredibly common, like we're talking like Silver Branch common, you may want to use it very early on in a league, with that Poised Prism. It doesn't have a lot of damage here, which, okay, it's not great, but, that's still like a decent amount, right? Like you could use this, like when you get into maps, if it's common enough, and all sorts of stuff like that. But it's probably going to be replaced exceptionally fast just due to the fact that you do want 2 6 links on a bow build, and you're going to be taking a look at those divination cards to get that Imperial bow base pretty quickly into a league. You're gonna, I had that on day 1 in the Sanctum League, and a lot of other people who were playing bows did too. It's a very common divination card. You can even farm it in SSF pretty much on day 1, so it's incredibly common, which really does make the use case of this bow a little bit limited. I'm sure there'll be some really broken interactions, but maybe not what I've seen so far in terms of what we have in the business here. Okay, so with that out of the way, let us cover the next portion here, Mana Forged Arrows. Very, very cool. This is a support gem, which I think is got massive potential. It's essentially an Athanath chant kind of effect in a can. So if you guys don't know, there's a helmet called Athanath's Chant, and it triggers spells whenever you use a bow ability, which is pretty cool. And this gives you that pretty much for free, a similar effect. I mean, it doesn't give you a spell, it gives you a bow attack instead. But it does give you a similar set of utility that you can have at your disposal. So first and foremost, you can trigger Ensnaring Arrow or Frenzy with this, and that is pretty excellent because those are both more damage multipliers or quality of life multipliers, which are excellent. And in addition to that, if you wanted to go down a different route, you could also set up a single target setup in this using Mana Forged Arrows, and that could also be quite interesting. Overall, there's a lot of different options here, but I haven't found a way to personally use this in my league starter, and I kind of wanted to kind of like just present what I've found so you guys can kind of pick it apart and see if you guys have any ideas, which you guys can comment down below. So let's go ahead and take a look at the problem which I've run into here on my build. So first and foremost, most bow builds, at least the ones that I've been playing, have a clearing setup, which is generally going to be a 6-link lightning arrow, tornado shot, ice shot, rain of arrows, whatever you want to go with. And that is something that you're going to juice up with stuff like GMP, Chain, Mirage Archer, and just go for the full clear package there. That's what you're looking for. And, you know, that's going to be what's going on there. And, you know, that is going to be taking up one of your 6 links. And the other 6 link is going to be dedicated to single target. And that's going to be another 6 link. And then pretty much the rest of your slots are just filled by default by, you know, like the sniper's mark, which you're going to have, you know, like dash or some sort of movement skill like flame dash or something like that. And then you're going to have your auras. You can't not have that. You're probably going to have custom damage taken, you know, and then you got Vaal haste, which is like 1 socket. And then that's it. Like, there's no more sockets, so you don't really have anywhere to put Mana Forged Arrows. From my perspective, this almost feels like a PoE 2 skill. You know, I just feel like I don't have any space for it in the end game, even though it is so cool. Now, I do think that you could make a build around this, and I do think it would be exceptionally cool, as it is got a lot of potential, but I don't think it fits into any existing elemental bow archetypes from what I've been able to find outside of the leveling experience. As soon as you get that double 6-link setup, it's pretty much locked in, and it's going to be pretty difficult to find any space for Mana Forged Arrows, just because you have so many other things that you're going to want to have going on there. You know, so overall, it's got a lot of potential. Very cool. Really love the addition, but I haven't found a use for it myself yet. Next up, we have Vaal Iceshot. Now, this is a similar kind of situation here. I don't think it fits into any existing bow archetypes that people are currently using, because the current meta around bows is to have that clear setup. You don't really care about the damage on that. Like, you do, but it's not there for single target. You don't really care about single target on that skill. And then you have a totem setup, which basically just absolutely minces apart all the bosses, you know, like they're nothing, and they just melt. You put them down, you run away, you run around, do whatever you want. If it's a pinnacle boss, you just run away from it, and it keeps shooting. Right? And that's kind of how it plays. And, you know, it's very powerful. You're basically a totem build with insane clear. And this doesn't play into that. Like, you do not really want this to be on your clear skill. Let's take Vaal Lightning Arrow, for example. Like, how much benefit is Vaal Lightning Arrow going to give me on my build if I socket it in here? Well, it's not going to give me a whole lot because I don't really have any more damage multipliers here. I have Mirage Archer, which is not a link, Chain, which is less damage from it. I've got Trinity, which, you know, okay, that is a damage link. I've got GMP, which, okay, will give it some damage, but it's going to be also losing damage. And then I have Life Tap, you know, which, okay, that's going to give some damage, but not a whole lot. So there's not really a whole lot of multipliers here compared to my totem setup, which is just 5 damage multipliers, right? So overall, it's not going to be doing that much single target damage, and my single target damage is kind of already solved. So at least for my league starter, which I've had a lot of success with, and I do plan to repeat at least for the first few days, Lightning Arrow, the Vaal variant, and the Vaal Iceshot don't really have a place. That doesn't mean they're not good though. It just means that you have to use them in a different way. So I imagine that the best way to use both of these is going to be as follows. Instead of using a totem setup, you're essentially going to use a Vaal Iceshot your lightning arrow setup. So you'll have your clear based lightning arrow, your clear based Iceshot, and then you will also have in another 6 link a separate single target focused lightning arrow or Iceshot, which you do then trigger the Vaal variant of on the boss and then go to town with that damage focused lightning arrow and Iceshot setup. And overall, I imagine they're both going to be very good at that. It remains to be seen whether or not they're going to be better than the ballistas, but I do think if you're looking for a different way to play bows, you're looking for a different angle, it could be pretty damn fun and pretty damn cool. So overall, that's giving me my opinion on the Vaal skills. I will still give them a go in my clear setup. I don't expect them to do very much damage, but they'll probably look pretty cool at least. Overall, I think that it's possible they could compete with the ballista, but it's pretty hard to compete with totems in terms of mechanics. Now, you could save quite a lot of points in the scenario in which you do use the Vaal Iceshot and the Vaal lightning arrow. You could lose all the points over here, and then you could lose all these points over here, which could be quite exceptional, and that could be a pretty good game. But overall, yeah, we're going to have to see how that plays out. I'm very excited to see what you guys come up with, but I'm going to be starting it safe, I think, with my build here and my totems. Now, let's move on to the final few things here, which are just a few summary points here, which people have pointed out to me. First and foremost, this mastery here is ridiculous. Hits have a 25% chance to treat enemy monster elemental resistance values as inverted. Essentially, every single 4 hits, you're essentially going to reverse their elemental resist. So if they had 50, they now have negative 50, and that is all before the penetration calculation. So even if you have Trinity, it's still going to be a massive more damage multiplier, and it's going to be pretty good. Absolutely want to be picking that up on every single build. Another thing people have pointed out, and I have now added, is that you get a ton of free suppression from the evasion mastery here, which is quite good. Combined with like 1 roll on your gear, or taking, like some suppression, over in both places, you can now pretty much get 100% suppression without ever having any on your gear. Or if you do have it on your gear, you can drop a whole suppression wheel. Because the critical strike is gone, you do not no longer have to like invest in that. So you do get some points back, and you can reinvest those points in the +1 projectile wheel here, which can be good, at least in the early game. You're probably going to drop that later on, but that's kind of where we're looking at here. All right, okay, so moving on. The last point I wanted to talk about, 2 more points here I wanted to talk about here, is the large thread of hope, which people have been discussing here, which could be potentially an option. So in the mid game and the kind of stage at which this build is at, so it was day 3 for me, it's probably like week 1 for most people, you may have access to a thread of hope, but I still am not sure I would use a thread of hope. And the reason for that is that resistances are tight, and I am using Poised Prism, and pretty much most of my gear is rare, and I'm also using a taming. So resistances are not easy on this build, and you also lost some resistances by losing the mastery for resistance here, and we've also got some passives here which give resistance as well. So do I really want to lose resistance from using a thread of hope? Not particularly. In addition to that, you also do lose the inspired learning slot, which you have here. Yes, you can get it back by putting it up here, but overall a dual socket is not free. You will be losing the damage for that. And then another point in there is going to be that you will also lose the opportunity to, either in the mid game, end game, whatever, socket in a timeless jewel in that slot. Now, at least before you get into the very end game where you start using Omniscience, you will potentially get some benefit from this if you use the large thread of hope here. If you can manage to resist, if you can deal with everything else, it could be pretty good and save you a lot of points. But as soon as you put on Omniscience, you're going to want to take that thing straight back off, because there is no better place, in my opinion, from what I've seen so far, to put the Timeless Jewel than here, and the absolutely monstrous gains that you get from putting the Timeless Jewel here cannot be overstated. In addition to that, you can also get some pretty massive value from using a massive thread of hope over here. It is pretty popular and widely known as one of the better locations you can put one, and using 2 threads of hope does seem a little bit excessive, especially when they have overlap in what they actually give you. So I'm not a big fan of it personally. I can see a small window of time in which it could be super duper powerful, especially if you don't want to go Omniscience. You could definitely go down that path, and that could actually be pretty good. But if you are going for Omniscience, I imagine that it's probably going to be phased out pretty quickly in favor of the Timeless Jewel in that slot. All right, next and last up here on the video agenda is going to be the discussion around dropping greater multiple projectiles for lesser multiple projectiles, or at all. Now, there is a case to be made for this for tornado shot builds in the ultra end game, when you have +3 projectiles from the quiver and the bow. But let's not talk about that now. Let's talk about league start scenarios. Should you do this? Well, First and foremost, most of the time, if you are using a ballista, which is the tried and true, the trusty old way to play bows, you don't actually use GMP ever really at all anyway. So that's not really a discussion, like, because you just don't use it anyway. So that's already correct. You would not use it in that setup. Now, if we're talking lightning arrow, the goal of this skill gem link setup is primarily to get as much coverage, as much screen-wide destruction as possible, and the limiting factor for most of that is how many projectiles do you have, and that is buffed by a lot by giving you the 2 additional projectiles. Before, as a Deadeye, I've mentioned in the other video, you have 7 with GMP. Going up to 9 is like night and day. It's absolutely absurd how much power that is, how much coverage that is when doing legions, when doing breaches, and when doing delirium mirrors. And to then take those back away in favor of just a little bit more damage, just doesn't feel very intuitive to me, especially because when you're rolling through maps on a bow build, if you're playing a mapping variant, which bow builds generally are geared towards mapping, you have stuff like Death Rush, Inspired Learning, Rampage. All these things are giving you more than enough damage. What you're missing is mechanical scalers, which is projectiles, and it's pretty difficult to get them because Inspired Learning doesn't give them as often anymore, and if you're playing Raider, which I am in the early game, you're definitely not going to have as many projectiles as you want, so sacrificing them for more damage on a lightning arrow or an ice shot just doesn't feel very intuitive to me, especially having played it myself quite a lot. I've been playing bows for years. The projectiles were always the bottleneck on it feeling good, and then we finally get them, and then people are like, hang on a second, let's take them away and deal more damage. That is probably not something that I personally am interested in going down. Definitely respect the decision, but not for me. All right, so let's get into the last point here, which is going to be, what if you were doing that with a single target ice shot or lightning arrow setup, like we were talking about earlier with the Vaal lightning setup here? That just makes sense. I'm not even sure I would run GMP or LMP or at all on a single target lightning arrow or ice shot setup, especially not with the new way that it scales. And the reason for that is that you've already got your clear skill out of the way. You don't need to worry about that. It's basically just single target here, so I wouldn't actually recommend running that either. So I guess I am kind of agreeing there. On the single target setup, GMP pretty much has no place on any of the bow single target setups, whether that be barrage ice shot, barrage lightning arrow, or Vaal variants of it. So I think that is correct, but I would not recommend removing GMP or LMP or whatever you're using on your clear skill. I think that you really do want to have that juice, especially if you've already got so many damage multipliers from the rest of your gear. All right, guys, that is going to be the video. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed. We've gone over pretty much all of the new bow stuff now, so the only thing left is the league start video and the build, which I will update the guide for you guys if you guys are interested. I do have quite a lot of experience, fortunately, with this build from Sanctum, so I think that I can give you guys, some tips, and maybe give you guys a bit of advice on maybe the direction you want to go in with a build, potentially, if you're interested in, kind of going a bit of a safer route. But, with all that said, if you guys enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe, chuck us a like, and, until next time, cheers.